Today we go back in time to the World War II era to visit Lord Haw Haw, or William Brooke Joyce. Joyce was born in New York, but while he was still a small boy, his parents returned to their native Ireland and settled in County Galway. Absolutely stunningly beautiful County Galway. They were strict Unionists and opposed to Irish republicanism, renting their houses to members of the Royal Irish Constabulary. It may not be well known in the Western Hemisphere that in the years between World War I and World War II, Ireland had a war of its own. It was called the Irish War of Independence. On one side was the IRA, and on the other, the British Army and the RIC, along with some other paramilitary groups like the Ulster Specials and the Auxiliaries. During the war, Joyce was recruited as a courier for intelligence units stationed at Galway. He was just supposed to carry messages back and forth, but the IRA thought he was doing much more. They believed he was collecting intel on them and reporting back to the Black and Tans. That could have been a very fatal action back then. The IRA did not mess around when it came to informants. On the other side of this, in 1920, a Catholic priest who sympathized with the IRA was abducted and murdered by the auxiliaries. So, yeah, it was pretty rough on both sides. Joyce was suspected of being involved with that killing. There was no evidence of that, but tensions were high, and rumors were things that got folks erased from life. Whether or not he was such a Republican that he would get involved in kidnapping and killing IRA sympathizers, there was likely a good price on his head by that point. So he was taken from his job as a courier, and he was enlisted in the Worcester Regiment. That took him out of Ireland and safely into England. There was a small problem in that he was underage, so the regiment kicked him out. He stayed in England, though, and his family would join him there. He became a teacher after some more study. By 1924, more than a decade before the shadow of war would fall over Europe again, Joyce was developing an interest in fascism. He developed political interests as well, working with a fascist party and supporting conservative candidates. He had a big old scar on his face. How it got there is probably Joyce's first shot at propaganda. He said he was attacked by communists, and sometimes he would add that they were Jewish communists. But his first wife said that no, it was an Irish woman who gave him that scar. You know what, with his Union sympathies and all. Right before the war begins, Joyce was the director of propaganda for the British Union of Fascists. If you need to have a director of propaganda, you're probably so far on the wrong side of society and history. I'm just making that clear. He brought the whole anti-Semitic policy change to British fascism. He became so vitriolic and so violent that the party leader sacked him in 1937. And with war brewing, the English were having none of fascism or Nazi sympathies. Joyce had both, and they were going to detain him, as they detained others. But Joyce slipped past them, though, and into Germany, and that was in August 1939. They gave the good little fascist citizenship in 1940. Joyce found in Hitler his idol. Perfect blend of anti-Semite and fascist as far as Joyce was concerned. The rest of the world had a different opinion. The Ministry of Propaganda also gave him a job, with the National Broadcasting House reading news in English. Nazi news, of course, all approved by propagandists. Soon he was also writing and delivering near-daily propaganda talks, and back in England, he was given the name Lord Haw Haw by a radio critic. Well, that's stock. The Nazi propaganda machine knew that any notoriety could be spun into even greater notoriety. So they started showcasing Joyce on their broadcasts. He was no longer reading the news, he was giving speeches. editorializing and giving his own views in a program that pretended to analyze the news. Quick, look around you, because that type of thing is happening all over Western media today. Shows made up entirely of the views of news broadcasters with the odd guest who agrees with them thrown in. Well, that was the same format. It was Sean Hannity, but 70 years earlier and paid for by the Nazi Party. He had a lot of listeners, but the bulk of them just wanted to hear what the other side was saying, because news of the war was so censored in England. Still, he had 6 million regulars. The Reich loved old Lord Haw Haw. He even gave lectures to SS members at the University of Berlin. So the war drags on and on and on, and the Nazis aren't doing so well. They're being pushed back on all fronts. 2 large bombs are being manufactured in the U.S., planned for 2 cities in Japan. Signs point to a loss by the Nazis and their allies in the Far East. I don't think Joyce is taking all this loss so well. He made his final broadcast in April 1945 during the Battle of Berlin. You remember that battle. Hitler in a bunker, high-ranking SS officers running for the hills and all that. Well, Joyce was drunk, and he told off his old country for not ending the war at Germany's pre-war borders. He went on and on about Stalin and the Soviets and how everybody was suddenly going to be under their oppression. The radio stations and recording studios were all being seized and used to broadcast what can only be called mockery and parody. As each studio fell into the hands of Allied powers, those listening could hear in real time that the war was in its final moments. The Allies weren't intent on merely capturing combatants, death camp guards, strategists, and medical personnel who conducted terrible experiments. Oh, no. They were intent on bringing the entire Nazi machine to the ground. And that meant that they were going to capture recruiters, industrialists, and the propaganda arm as well. Joyce smelled what was in the air and took off toward Denmark. He was captured there by British forces at Flensburg. He was probably headed there because Hitler had a successor. Not a lot of people remember this, Admiral Karl Donitz. He had taken refuge there. It was kind of the last stand of a dying Nazi power. The new German leader, though, would surrender himself to the Allies. During the whole incident, Joyce was shot through the butt cheeks. Yep, through and through. Phew, right through the cheeks. He was handed over to military police and then taken to London. He wasn't tried before a war tribunal like a lot of war criminals were. Instead, he was charged with 3 counts of high treason under British law and tried at the famous Old Bailey. The first count was for propaganda, the second for becoming a German during the war, and the third was for propaganda while he was still a British subject. Well, now, there's a small hiccup. Joyce never did get UK citizenship. He was an American until he was German. How could he be convicted of treason against a country that he was not a citizen of? Well, that took some fancy footwork back in the day. People weren't prepared for these types of situations. Joyce had a British passport, which entitled him to diplomatic protection. How did he get that? Well, he lied. Still, the court bought the argument that if you hold a passport, even if you lied to get it, then you owe allegiance to the country and therefore can be convicted of treason. This also was not a war crimes tribunal. It was an English court. How do they prosecute someone for actions they took entirely in Germany? Well, on the basis of their national security. That's how. The broadcasts, after all, did not stay in Germany. They floated over the radio waves all the way to Britain, where they were received on radios there. In any event, the legal wranglings, Joyce was convicted of the first count, the most serious of them, and he was sentenced to death, along with a handful of other treasonous folks, like Irma Gies. He went to the gallows, defiant. Unlike Irma Gies, He was extremely talkative. He urged Britain to be great again. You know that slogan, right? Be great again. He blamed Jews for the war. He knocked the Soviet Union and prayed that the swastika would rise from the dust. He went to his death with propaganda still on his lips. His was one of the last deaths by hanging in the UK, with the exception of murderers. Propagandists beware. It doesn't usually end well, and in the right time and in the right place, it could end with convictions for treason and a visit to the gallows. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.